Welcome to Pat Writes Books. The video you're about to watch is intended for mature audiences. It will likely contain an abundance of cursing, adult discussions, and worst of all, personal opinions. So chill out, grab a snack, and enjoy the show. Take it away, Sensei.
How's it going, everyone? My name is Patrick. I'm your friendly internet wordsmith, and today we're going to talk about whether or not your MC is in fact a basic bitch. We've all been there. We've all read the stories where the protagonist, the guy or gal, the one, the chosen one, the person we are supposed to invest all our time, interest, and energy into. Yeah, they got the personality of a wet piece of cardboard. But even if that's not the case, and let's say these characters aren't the main squeeze, nobody likes wet cardboard. So without further ado, we are going to go ahead and jump into this video and discuss what makes the character basic and how to avoid writing these characters in your story. So first off, we need to establish a baseline so you guys know what I'm talking about. Now, when I say basic, I don't mean that the character is simple or lives a mundane life or anything of that nature. In fact, there are a number of stories in which that is the jumping point for that character, is that they live a boring everyday life and they're lusting after that the succulent teat of adventure or whatever. That's perfectly fine. What I mean by basic is when you have a character that has no character development over the course of the story, no agency, no defining attributes beyond what's nestled between their legs, things of that nature. For example, if we are halfway through your story and we still have no idea what your character even looks like, I'm sorry to tell you this, but your character is basic. If the most descriptive part of your character is the unique and totally unrealistic way they spell their name, yep, that character is basic. If your character happens to be plucked and placed into a magical, fantastical world, everything just seems to fall into their lap and they couldn't find an active choice if a bitch slapped them in the face, they are basic. Now, there are those that subscribe to the notion that basic characters are a good thing. And the idea here is that basic characters are pretty much blank slates that readers can imprint themselves upon and, pretty much see themselves within that character. And the theory behind that is that the reader will be more invested. However, if you believe that, I'm sorry to tell you, but you are wrong. And I really want you to strive to do better. Why, you may ask? Well, first off, blank slate characters suck ass. Refer to the previous statement on wet cardboard. Secondly, when you use blank slate characters, you invite an unattended effect into your story that can be very hard to overcome. Using basic blank slate characters can a lot of times have the opposite effect. For example, let's take Harry Potter as an example. The protagonist of Harry Potter, starting off in the first book, was a young boy who wasn't the biggest, wasn't the fastest, wasn't the strongest, wasn't much of anything. He lived a very hard knock life, and while a lot of people couldn't relate to that very hard struggle of being an orphan, living with your piece of shit uncle, your cousin's a fucking terrorist, and you're forced to live in a cupboard. Some people, I'm sure, can relate to that, but the vast majority won't be able to see that. But they can relate to being that misfit kid, or, being the last one picked at dodgeball, and no one really wanted to fuck with you as a kid. A lot more people can relate to that, and thus see themselves in the story, and want to see how the story plays out, and root for the protagonist and whatnot. When you use a blank slate character that has none of that, what you're pretty much asking the reader to do is to become invested in something else in the story. So that sounds easy enough, right? Just find something else for your readers to latch onto. Well, I'm here to tell you that is a very hard task to do, especially considering, I know you've probably heard the old adage by this point in your life, that there is no original thought. And I'm sorry to tell you this, but it is true. Now, I hate to be the one to break it to you, but that idea that you swear is a new idea, concept, yada, 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 it has most likely been done before in some way, shape, or form. Now, that's not to say that you shouldn't try to tell your story. That's not what I'm saying at all. You just have to take the tropes and reinvigorate them and put your own stamp on them, cross genres. Do whatever you got to do to make them feel new, basically. With that being said, if your story centers around Wet Cardboard, The Chosen One, you're basically asking your readers to become invested in the book's plot or premise or even the magic system. Pretty much anything other than that blank slate character. And why would a reader, hard truth, but why would the reader take time reading story A, where it has likely been done before in some other fashion with, Wet Cardboard, or another story, similar premise, but has the bonus feature of having a main character that they can resonate with? So here's the part you've all been waiting for. How to turn your basic character into the hero everyone wants to read about. In my opinion, you want to focus on these 3 core areas. First up, and most importantly, your character needs to have some level of agency. Nobody wants to read a story where the protagonist is the chosen one and they just need to save the day because that's what the chosen one does. That's boring as shit. Nobody wants that. On the contrary, when you have a protagonist who's like, yeah, fuck all that destiny shit, I'm not putting my life on the line, and then their family gets murdered by the villain, and they have this burning quest for revenge that they have to go on, then you have a reluctant hero who is throwing themselves into the conflict for the wrong reasons at first, and maybe somewhere along the lines they realize that this is the right thing to do. They should have done it all along, yada, yada, yada. But in my opinion, and I'm sure a lot will agree, that's way better than Wet Cardboard, who was just doing the shit because some stone told him to do it. Now, I know what you're thinking. Your character is too young, or they're a soldier that's just following orders, or whatever you think is an excuse to not give your characters agency. Yeah, that's bullshit. Every human who has ever lived has agency, even at a young age. It is a fact of life. And to omit that in your story makes your characters just feel less human and less engaging. So, don't do it. Give your characters active choices to make. Number 2, your character needs an expansive backstory, and I mean expansive. The more details, the better. I'm dead ass serious. You need to know everything about this character, front to back, head to toe. You need to know. The reason for this is because there is no human who has ever existed who was just plopped into the world a fully developed, fully functioning adult. We are all products of our parents, or lack thereof, our environment, the city we grew up in, our friends we've lost, experiences we've had, schools we've gone to, schools we didn't go to. The list goes on. With everything that could potentially influence a person in their characteristics and behaviors and whatnot, it's absolutely ludicrous for any blank slate character to exist. It feels off. It feels wrong. I guess unless you were writing a story about an AI robot who was born and learning to become human, I guess. But I would expect maybe like midway through the story that robot to get some damn personality. So yeah, no excuse. Quick disclaimer though. It is going to be very tempting to include all of this history that you come up with into the story. I mean, after all, you're going to spend a lot of time crafting it. It's going to feel very tempting, and you're going to feel like your readers need to know everything that went down with your character to understand their psyche. But trust me, it is not as important as you think. Your readers don't need to know everything. The trick to this is to keep the information on a need-to-know basis. You want to organically weave it into the story as pieces become relevant. For the love of God, do not, and I repeat, do not dump it all on the reader at once. You want to included in dialogue or body language, or I don't know, some character discovers a book somewhere that has, I don't know. I don't care how you do it. Just don't dump it all in once. And for the love of God, do not, and I repeat, do not write it as a prologue at the beginning of the book. If you do, click off the video now, because fuck it, there's no helping you. Don't do it. And number 3, the last area you need to focus on to elevate your characters is you need to iron out their weaknesses. And yes, you heard me correctly. I said weaknesses. Your character needs to have a kryptonite. I know it's tempting to write your character or MC, protagonist, whatever. I know it's tempting to write them buff as hell, no flaws, they never fuck anything up, they have a perfect ass, tits on fleek, whatever. That's boring as shit, and nobody can relate to that. Do not write that. Characters become the most interesting when we get to see them at their worst. When they have a gnawing flaw that they just have to overcome in order to reach the top of that mountain. When we see them battered and bruised and all that, I want to say good shit, but it feels... You get what I'm trying to say. Characters are the most interesting when we see them in that state, because it's something that we can all relate to, because nobody's perfect. And everyone will be at that point at some point in their life, or something similar. However, do not overdo this. Just like nobody wants to read a story about perfect Patty who never fucks anything up and all that jazz. Nobody wants to read a story about a self-loathing piece of shit who's mean to everybody because he's a dick, or she's a, I don't know, she could be a dick too, I guess. Nobody wants to read their story either. So you gotta find the balance there. You gotta find the equilibrium. One more thing. You do not have to do this for every single character in your book. It's not practical nor needed. If we're talking about some random dude who shows up in chapter 3, gets murdered in chapter 4, nobody gives a fuck about Joe Schmo who got stabbed in the back of the bar. Nobody cares. You don't have to do all this for them. They're fine being basic. And that's going to do it for this one, guys. Hopefully this has enlightened you on the beauty of writing complex characters and has hopefully spared you from writing a basic bitch. Feel free to chime in down below in the comments. I would love to get your opinion on this topic.
Thanks for kicking it with us. If you had a good time, go ahead and slap that like button. And if you're new, consider subscribing, because we do this every week. Of course, you're going to want to hit that bell too, so you never miss an upload. Have an awesome day, achieve something great, and we'll catch you later.